And here we go, starting with the first part of the new Dark Elf project. And first figures that I'm painting up for this project are my custom-made shades. These are made from the High Elf Shadow Warrior bodies with Corsair arms and Dark Eldar Kabalite Warrior heads. Looks pretty good, I think. And we're starting with the skin. Have to do that first because of the large cowl that they're wearing, which is part of the cloak. And I'm gonna do 5 steps with the flesh, and we're starting off with my standard flesh colors, which is Vallejo Panzer Aces Shadow Flesh, mixed in with a little bit of flesh base for a very dark shade color. And then after that is the second shade layer, working our way up. This is again the same 2 colors, just this time it is mostly the flesh base with just a little bit of the shadow added. And normally I do a lot more layers of flesh, but speed is important because I'm painting up an entire army and I don't want to spend years on it. So we're just doing 2 shade layers here. And then next is the main base color, which is obviously going to be the Panzer Aces flesh base. Again, always applying things in a smaller and smaller area, but the flesh base color, the base coat, should be over a majority of the model, or majority of the face in this case. And we're going with 2 highlight steps. First by mixing in some Vallejo Panzer Aces highlights flesh in with the flesh base color. And normally if I was doing a single figure, again, I would be adding more layers, but because speed is important here, we're just going to go with 2 layers. So we have the first one here, and then the second highlight layer, which is of course done by adding more of the highlights flesh color. You notice, as always, the areas are getting smaller and smaller, so this area is really just for the tips of the cheeks, the nose, the knuckles, the ears, what have you. Since this is a crude, sort of thick painted highlight job, we're gonna smooth it out and clean it up a bit by giving the flesh a very thin wash of brown ink. This is sort of a glaze, sort of a wash. It'll help soften the rough edges of the highlighting and just bring the colors together and add a bit more depth to it without taking up too much time. And once that's dry, we can move on to the cloak. And the first layer of paint for the cloak is Vallejo Model Color Violet, and this is a step that I can probably skip. However, I'm very repetitive with my painting and I need to do it in a certain order, so even if colors are completely covered, I still need to do it. And it does affect the colors that you're putting over. If I did the next step over just black, the color would not be as bright as if I did it over this violet color, because we are doing layering here. But anyway, so you can skip this if you want, but I really feel it's necessary, for me personally at least. Next we start mixing in what is my main color of this army, which is Vallejo Model Color Blue Violet. And what I'm doing here is I'm mixing a lot more blue violet in than I would normally. Something I learned years ago with this color, or at least with this mix between violet and blue violet, is the color really it looks very light when you put it on when it's wet, but when it dries it darkens up, which makes it a little tricky to work with. One workaround I wanted to try here is rather than start with a little bit of blue violet in the violet color that I did previously and then work my way up, I mixed a lot of blue violet, and then later we're going to go in and paint in the shadows by hand, which is really easy on this big flowing cloak. So this particular color is blue violet, which is a little bit of violet mixed in. I believe we're going to do 2 shade steps here at the moment. And next, one more shade later before we get to the base coat. This is, again, blue violet, which is a touch of violet placed inside. One thing I want to point out is, again, because speed is essential when painting an army, I'm painting the cloak here wrong, for lack of a better word. To do proper highlighting on a billowy cloak like this, what you really want to do is work the brush sideways left to right, because then it helps to break up the pattern between the shades and the highlights of the rolling cloak. Going up and down as I'm doing, mainly on the back, it's easier to see. There we go, like that. It's the colors are less likely to blend together because basically you're painting a wall going up and down rather than painting a jagged line going back and forth. However, again, because speed is essential, we're doing it this way. Because the other way would look better, but it would take too long. And now we moved up to our base coat color, which is the straight Vallejo model color, blue violet. And funny thing is, as you paint an army over the course of like 10 years, like I did with this one, things do change. And this was not originally my base coat. My base coat was originally this color, essentially that previous layer I just applied. It was a slightly darker version of the blue violet. However, after painting so many years, it just sort of segued into this brighter color. And it was so subtle I never really noticed it, but that's just a little tidbit story there for you. You know, you paint things for so long and then things slightly change without even realizing it. You kind of get into automaton mode painting and you don't realize what you're doing until it's a bit too late, but it's totally fine here. We're going to add 2 highlights to the cloak, both times by mixing in some Vallejo game color Wolf Grey. And again, as you can always see when we're highlighting, we're moving into smaller and smaller areas, so we're just working on the edges, on the and on the top of the folds of the cloak. I'm being really detailed in this video in case you haven't realized it, because a lot of these colors are going to be used again and again throughout this whole video series that I'm doing, and I don't want to repeat every single step in every single video because it's going to get really repetitive. So this video is being very detailed, and it's probably going to be very long, but the other ones are going to be shorter and reference back to this video as needed. And then that final highlight, again by adding a bit more Wolf's Grey to that previous mix, just applying it to the very edges of the cloak. And for a final highlight like this, you can go a little bit more extreme with the highlight. You can make the paint a bit thicker too, because it really helps the colors to pop if you have that extreme, not white would be bad, but that a larger jump in the lightness of the color. It really helps just to make that the cloak pop and the color pop. Just don't overdo it, because if you overdo it, then it becomes a highlight, a regular highlight, and it you lose the effect. So less is more if you're going for that extreme edging look. So we're done with the cloak now, but now I'm going to go back and add a bit more shade. And I have a mix here of the Vallejo Violet mixed in with just a little bit of the blue violets. And because we were painting up and down rather than left to right, it is a bit stark contrast between the colors. And so, I'm adding a bit more shade in the deep recesses. It's easier doing it now than it would have been doing it previously. It would have been very hard to hide the details. And also, this is sort of like a feathering out the roughness of the previous highlights. It's sort of like the wash we did on the face. However, the paint's a bit thicker, and it's applied more specifically in the recesses or just any other areas where I think a little softening of the colors is needed. Now on to the blue, which is my second main color in this army. And the base color of the army is Vallejo Game Color Magic Blue. And just for a small amount of shade, because this color is not on a large amount of the model, so I just added a bit of Stormy Blue in with the Magic Blue for a little bit of shade. Then applying right now is the straight Magic Blue color. And again, we're going to highlight twice, both times adding a little bit more white to the Magic Blue. And originally, the first highlight for this color was Vallejo model color Andrea Blue, but at some point during painting this army, I forgot that and started just using white twice. And recently just actually checked my notes and found what I did wrong. However, I liked using the white twice more than using the Andrea Blue. So there you go. Again, as with the purple, colors slightly change over the course of several years when you're painting an army, at least for me. And here we are applying the second highlight, Magic Blue and white mixed twice. Again, just the edges of the shirt, for lack of a better word, and just to make the color pop a bit more. Okay, on to the next part, which is the metal. I always like to use Vallejo Model Air colors for my metallics because it's very fine. And what we have here is, it's a mix of Vallejo Model Air steel mixed with a little regular black paint for some shade. And also I like to take a bit of the sheen out of the metallics because I don't like my metallics too bright and shiny. I like to dull them a little bit, make them look a bit more realistic. But anyway, covering the chainmail, covering the scale mail, covering the swords, all with this color. And next we're using straight Vallejo Model Air steel. And nice trick I discovered for painting swords on models is paint that previous color and then use the straight steel to just go along one edge of the blade and then skip aside, turn the figure around. And then on the opposite side, again, paint that straight steel color. And what it does, it gives a two-tone effect, like there's a little bit of light reflecting off of it differently depending on how the blade is being held in the light. And it's a quick way to paint swords, and we're going to put a little shade on it later to improve the look, but it's effective and fast. And also, of course, we're painting the steel on the rest of the figure as well. Trying to dry brush the scales a little bit, but we're being haphazard because speed, as I mentioned before, very important, and we're going to put a wash on it too. Now I've mixed up a wash, black ink mixed with a little bit of Pledge with Future Shine, which lets the ink flow very nicely and allows me a bit extra cleanup time if necessary. And all the scale work and chainmails really works really well with the wash. And also I'm applying a little bit to the blade, just towards the handle area. And I usually do this wash twice. I'll do one very thin one, let it dry completely, and then apply a thicker one if I feel that it needs it. The reason is because the metallics tend to repel the wash at the first go, and by applying a thin layer it kind of preps the surface, so then the second one will stick a lot better and more likely to be placed where I want it. So one or two washes here depending on how things turn out. On to the gold now, and gold needs to go over a brown undercoat, otherwise it's just going to look dull and yucky, especially if you're putting it over black. So you need to put a layer of brown first, and to save time and to give a bit of extra shade, I always mix Vallejo Model Color Flat Earth in with the gold, which is Game Color Glorious Gold. And it just adds a bit more shade, and you're going to cover with gold anyway. And, you know, it helps out, and it doesn't take any more time. So undercoat slash shade of the mix of these two colors. And then obviously the base color will be the straight Glorious Gold. if you undercoat too, then you don't have to worry about trying to glob on your metallics. I know a lot of beginner painters do that because it doesn't cover well, and so they use it straight out of the bottle and just put on globs of it, trying to cover up that undercoat, that black undercoat or the black primer. So undercoat first, and you can thin out your metallics, and they'll look a lot better. And for the highlights, just mixing in some of the Vallejo Model Air steel, and a small amount of steel here. Don't over highlight gold, because then it starts looking fake. It starts looking like silver. So just a small amount, and again, just hitting the tips. We're just doing one highlight here. And for shade, we're using some Vallejo brown ink, and again, using 2 shades if I find it necessary. Again, the first one doesn't tend to stick always, and sometimes you have to let it dry and apply another one to get that the right amount of shade. Alright, moving along as my voice starts going out. Painting the wood areas now, which is the crossbow essentially on this particular figure. And the wood area is one part of this color scheme I'm not happy with. I actually had a much lighter wood color previously in the previous iteration of this army, and didn't like it, and also it was kind of based on colors that I was running out of that I can't buy anymore. So what I'm switching it up to here is some Vallejo Model Color Chocolate Brown as a base. Well, it's a bit of a shade color, really. The main base color is the flat earth, which you'll see in a second, but this does affect that flat earth color, and well, we'll see in a moment. So now I'm applying the flat earth color, and if I applied it over the black, it'll be a bit too dark. The point of the chocolate brown is to lighten it up a bit, and again, I'm still not 100% sure if I like this color with the with this paint scheme, but this is sort of my go-to wood color, and I don't know, I think I want something a bit more unique, but I'm not sure what to go with. It kind of depends when I start working on more woody subjects in the army, possibly like the chariots. I may go with a different color for the chariots, and then I can easily go back to this color and change it if necessary. And for the highlights, using some Vallejo Game Color Cobra Leather, just hitting the edges of the bows, excuse me, the edge of the bow. And again, this is kind of my standard wood color. Really want to work on coming up with something different, but I'm thinking darker, but there is a lot of black on this figure. I don't want to go too dark. I still want some contrast in there, but we'll see as this army and this project moves along. And then after painting the gold trim on the crossbow, giving the whole thing a light wash of black and brown ink, just to get some contrast between the gold and the wood, and of course to give some shade to the wood. Now on to the black, the gloves, the quiver, and the boots. I undercoated all those areas in black. Even though there's black primer, I still want to put black paint over it, so it's a smooth surface, or an even unblotchy surface, because the black paint is different than the black primer, and you will see well, at least I'll see the difference. So covering that up, and of course there's paint splotches too, but covering up that black. And what we're doing here is I mixed in a little bit of Vallejo Somber Gray, which they've changed the name, now it's Shadow Gray. Mixed a little bit of that into the black, and I'm being a bit more rough with my highlights than I normally do, especially with this black color, because well, let's go to the second part, and then I'll finish the thought here. For the second part, second highlight, I mix in a bit more of the Shadow Somber Gray, and the reason I'm being a bit more stark and harsh with the highlights on the black than I normally do is because this is an army I'm painting, and the colors need to stand out on the battlefield. I tend to paint single figures, not armies, and very subtle highlights, which take a long time to do, and they look great when you hold the figure right up to your face, but when you place it on the battlefield, you can't see it, and so I want people to be able to see the highlights here, so I'm going a bit harsher than I normally would. And a good example is on my Corsairs. I did a very subtle green highlight to their black areas. You can't see it. You hold the figure up to your face, you can see it, but on the battlefield you can't. So I'm purposely being a bit more crude with my highlights than I normally would, just so you can actually see them on the battlefield. The hair is painted the exact same way as the boots and the gloves, by adding the shadow somber gray. However, each time I mix in a little bit more of the somber gray than I did for the boots. So the first layer a little bit more somber gray than the first layer of the boots, and the second layer a little bit more somber gray than the second layer of the boots. And I'm not sure where or why I started painting all the hair black on these guys. It's a bit boring, I know, but I think at one point I had to fit black into the paint scheme for one of the figures, and it just kind of stuck. And for that second highlight on the hair, being rather stark here, just hitting like the top of the head, not too many places. The idea here is giving an idea where the light would reflect off of shiny, healthy hair. So just one or two spots to get like a little sheen drop on the hair, and we call it quits with that. One of the final colors in my paint scheme for this army is Vallejo Model color Emerald, emerald green, and it's used in very small portions on some figures. I even have problems trying to figure out where to put it in, but it's like for plumes on heads or trim on his armor, this is a good area for it. There's a lot more green on this particular figure than a lot of the other ones I painted. It's just how the figure was sculpted and what I thought would work best. But it does add a bit more lively color to it, and I really like the mix of the blue and the purple and the green all together, working together. And then for the emerald green, just highlighting with a little bit of white, and then we are finally done. And I managed to get 10 of these guys done in a little over a week, which is like a record for me. And when I started painting these guys and building them, I did not know how well they would fit into the new Dark Eldar sculpts. They look really good in my current army, which is a mix of High Elf and Dark Elf bits. However, at the moment, I'm still not sure how well they would fit, but I think they look pretty good at least, which is always important. But there you go. So that is the first unit of my new Dark Elf army. Again, this is a very long video. The rest of them will hopefully be shorter, but I wanted to be really detailed up front on how everything was completed. One thing I just remembered, I forgot to mention that black wash step I did on the armor. I usually do that closer towards the end of the project because I also use that color to clean up any rough areas where a little black wash, a black line, would help make things pop a bit more, like around the elbows or the weapons, or what other area that I think I missed something, and just a little quick dab of black will help clean it up and help it work out better. But other than that, this is everything you've seen. All went into this model, these models, and there you have it. So hope you join me for the rest of this series as it plays out over the next several months. Thanks for watching.